So here we are down beneath the church itself, St Cuthbert's church up behind us, and down here St Cuthbert's Well, or as they say locally, and very often in Northumberland they call it Cuddy's Well. It's got this sort of affectionate name, Cuddy's Ducks, Eider Ducks, because they sort of slept under his bed on the Farn Islands or whatever. And this is a traditional holy well. Do you think this might have been the starting place of the church?
I suspect so. I suspect this is the reason why not only the church, but Bellingham are here.
So, would it have, might it have been, would it have started with him, or do you think there would have been a holy site way back in?
Who knows?
Who could tell?
It was ascribed to him by pretty early days. There were stories of three miracles here in the 12th century stories.
Right.
Chronicled by Reginald de Durham, who's a bit of a dubious source.
That's from Durham after all.
Durham, yes. They were trying to own St Cuthbert. But what happened was, the three miracles all concerned a poor but pious bridge builder called Spriok.
Spriok, the bridge builder?
Yeah. Number one, his daughter, Ida, was on the feast of St Lawrence. Didn't go to church, it was sewing a dress at home.
Shocker.
And she was paralysed.
Yeah.
He prayed, and St Cuthbert appeared and said, take some water from the well. Ida took it and got better.
What?
That was number one.
That's a nice one.
Number two, also to do with Ida, it's Ida's wedding day. On Ida's wedding day, a heartless bailiff took poor Spriok's single cow and gave it to one of the tenants.
The beast!
And he prayed to St Cuthbert, and lightning struck the tenant's house. The cow survived and came back to Spriok.
I'm looking forward to the third one.
The third one, there was two thieves stole Spriok's axe, which is very important to the bridge builder. One was Walter the Flander of Flanders and his sidekick, and he prayed to St Cuthbert, and the axe took on a life of its own and chopped up the two thieves.
What a marvellous well it is. It is a fantastic thing. The atmosphere. I mean, this is 18th century discover, but the source has been pouring out since the beginning of time. Do you think it's called Cuddy's Well because he came here to preach here, or do you think it's because of the story of his body being carried?
Who knows? Who knows? I don't know.
I like to think of him. I like to. I mean, you hear stories about his genteelness with the locals and the way he walked around, just like Hayden had done before him, to come and preach to people. And it seems to me that this is the sort of place that he might have chosen. A lovely little hill, a little holy well. Well, it's such a lovely atmosphere, hasn't it?
Oh, should we go and see the church?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, nicely finished.
Yes,
down here.
this is the original East End, but what is interesting is at the corner here, plinths. I like plinths.
You've always been a plinth man.
See the east wall, the original plinth, but round the corner, the plinth sticks out.
Sticky outy plinth.
Yeah, because they've rebuilt the wall further back. The original wall has been 6 inches further out. So the plinth is telling us a story. The whole building has stories.
Right. And that story is?
That the south wall of the chancel is rebuilt someday.
Ah, right here. Oh, I understand you there.
And if we go on now and look at the east side of the south transept, we'll see something different.
One can hardly wait. Yeah, that's good now. That's well spotted.
Okay, here we are at the angle between the south transept and the chancel. There's something very interesting. In the transept wall, there is this set of angle coins. That was the southeast corner of the original south aisle. So it shows that the aisle of around 1190 came before the transept of around 1250. So again, stages in the building history.
Stages and stages and stages. But
also here,
I have got one of my favourite little objects. This is a gravestone from I think 1609, is it, or 16? I can't remember what the date is. 1630 something down here. An extremely wild carving, all the lettering. It's somebody called Charlton, and you can see at different places that like here's the ton of Charlton. There's been something up there. There's the Charl bit, and here's the ton bit here. It's been it's been chopped, it's wild, it's sticky outy letters instead of sticky inny letters.
Yeah.
It shows how primitive this place was
Yeah.
in 1635, when you can get or whatever the date was, when you can get a gravestone to somebody relatively posh that's as primitive
Yes.
and ill-disciplined as
You
that.
see, bottom right-hand corner, there's his sword. So the medieval tradition of bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, down there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
his sword down there. And not
Yeah, so the
never
medieval
spotted.
tradition of carving an emblem on a stone is going on.
Extraordinary stuff.
Interesting. Well, here we are looking at the south wall of the nave. You can see quite a bit of the history of the church here. Those lancet windows, 13th century in style, but I think they're around 1600, because Eglingham Church, St Maurice at Eglingham, up in North Northumberland, that was wrecked by the Scots in the 1580s as well, and that has absolutely identical windows.
I
So
don't think they could be reused earlier ones.
people have suggested that, but the way that the tops of them are formed from two inclined slabs, if you look at the left-hand one, you can see there's two slabs set diagonally. That's exactly as at Eglingham, which has a similar history. And then those buttresses, I think they've been added. The weight of that vault has caused structural problems over the years, caused big problems in the mid-20th century. But I think those buttresses are probably 18th century, added on to try and keep the place
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
A lot of churches have been doing their best to try and
Because the
fall
weight
down.
would be tremendous, wouldn't
Yes.
it? And even the roof with
Those
that,
stone slabs up there, yes.
those massive stone slabs as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. It's a most unusual
Yeah.
facade, that, isn't it?
And the door, look at the doorway as well, a very sort of segmental pointed
The one
arch.
with the picturesque oil tank.
The
in
glorious
front of
oil
it,
tank in front of it,
Yeah.
yes, dear, dear. And over the doorway is a panel, a sunk panel with a moulded surround. That looks very post-medieval. What do you think, John? Coat of arms, maybe?
I would have thought it was a coat of arms,
Whoever put up money for the reconstruction.
or could it have been a virgin and child or something like that?
We are post-medieval.
And I know. I'm just trying to
Well,
think
up
of.
here, out here, anything's possible, yes.
Yeah,
A statue, yeah.
but certainly a statue like.
Yeah,
Yeah, very, very, very interesting though. Mixture of old
Yes.
and new.
yeah. But a
Marvellous.
massive buttress at the southwest corner there.
Yes, gigantic.
And the bell coat is Victorian.
Yeah,
So there's a lot going on in this wall.
marvellous.
You can't see the medieval bits on the outside. They're embedded like fossils in the internal walls.
Oh, what a beautiful phrase. That's great. Embedded like fossils. Well, I mean, that is sensational, isn't it? I mean, if you think about the churches of Northern England or of this part of the world, stuff like this is rare and instinct, isn't it? It's just, we've got a lot of defensible churches in Northumberland.
Yes.
But something like this is not only defensible, but classy.
Yes.
I'm thinking of other churches, one in Cumberland called Bolton Gate, the great pointed vault. I'm thinking of Ladykirk on the Scottish side of the border near Norham. And in this one, just those, really to be honest, just those three of this sort of quality of vault. It's absolutely amazing. I happen to know that it's supposed to date from 1609, which was after England and Scotland were joined together as one country.
Yes.
It seems unlikely that to me.
Well, they say every castle is built too late for the last war, don't they?
Oh, is that right? Do you think it's possible that?
Well, I don't know. The problem is there's a record in the 1609, there's a reference to the church being in ruins. The big last recorded troubles when the Scots visitors came and played havoc were in the 1580s. So.
But you can imagine that in the 1580s they would have decided, well, we're not going to let that happen again.
Yes.
We'll build ourselves a fab defensible one about that sort of time.
Well, of course, they did find cannonballs in the vault.
Oh.
Right? If there's cannonballs there, something after 1600-ish, involving somebody finding a cannon church, not on record. A bit doubtful, so I don't know.
I somehow, in my heart of hearts, I feel that this extraordinary thing has to have been built before the wars between England and Scotland came to an end, really. And maybe it got ruined in the 1580s or
maybe the church was derelict and called ruined. You can never quite trust the terms in these old accounts. What ruined means, what rebuilt means, it's quite variable.
It is fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, you can go to 1,000 churches and not come across something as sensational as that.
Yes.
It's just
And
absolutely
it's still a mystery, so let the mystery remain.
So, I mean, to move on from here, is this the beginning, or have you got something that predates this to show
Oh
us?
yes, there's lots of interesting things that predate this.
Well, shall we move to that then?
Move to that.
Okay. So, right now, Peter, your job now is to convince me that there's something existed before all of this fantastic defensive stuff was done. There's an earlier church. What have I got to look at?
Well, behind us, in the southeast corner of the nave, you can see a restaurant that's for an arch of an earlier arcade, dated at 1190.
So that's piers and arches.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
The church was larger then.
Right. So what? There was arches down the side. Was that on both sides?
There were aisles on both sides. Yes, in each corner of the nave, there's one of these restaurants just showing through.
And what date are they?
Around 1190.
And does that match then the chancel arch?
Yes, it matches the chancel arch and those three lancet windows behind the altar.
So there was a big, quite impressive
There was a
church
big
in the
church
13th
in
century.
the 13th century. That was the good years before we fell out in Scotland.
Right. That's fantastic. And what about this arch behind me then? I mean,
And that goes with the addition that probably goes with the roof. That opens to the south transept, but the transept's been largely rebuilt. It's too wide for the original transept.
right. 17th century nave now.
Yeah.
Before that, a 13th century.
Made with aisles and transepts. The transepts are a bit later than the aisles.
And would you say that it was made smaller because of the troubles that Bellingham went through?
It got wrecked and got rebuilt smaller. Yeah.
Right, okay. Where should we go now? Obviously, everybody who knows me knows I'm a sentimental old fool, and I was attracted by these gorgeous robin redbreasts up here, but thinking of redness reminds me, Peter, that whenever we go to churches, it seems to me, you gan on about reddened stonework, like this stonework down here, and you say that that's evidence that the place has been burnt, been attacked.
Churches in Northumberland, certainly. That is very clear fire reckoning.
This
building has been burned at least once.
So that ties together our 13th century church and the need for defence as well.
Yes.
The place was burned down at some time.
Yeah.
Wow. This East End it's really beautiful, isn't it? It's,
it's a surprising survival. It's the original East End. That's from the 1190 church, those three lancet windows.
Almost always when you go to a church in Northumberland, it's been restored by the Victorians, hasn't it?
Yes, and they usually put the holy end of the church above the altar. If they're going to restore one thing or replace one thing, they improve that. But here, the original fenestration survives.
Magnificent stonework.
Yeah, and reddened, as you can see. Reddened. Here we are in the south transept, and look, John, there is a corbel. I like corbels.
Yeah. I'm always fond of a corbel.
Yeah.
That's the support for an arch.
Yes, there's been an arcade here. That is 13th century, you can tell from the nail head over
those little dotty bits just below the top of the nail head, aren't they?
Yeah. So there's been an arcade here, so the transept has been narrower.
Right.
So a lot's happened, but that's a very nice feature to survive. And that's maybe 1250.
Right, I would say that, yeah.
Maybe 1250.
Well, what a church inside. Yeah. Very good. So, extraordinary church, but the one bit that we've not looked at is this up at the west end, which looks to me as if it's been faffed around with quite a bit.
A lot, yes. Now this is a glorious piece of what I call archaeology above ground, stratigraphy in stone. You've got lots going on. If you look at the west window, that's very Victorian with that segmental chamfered rear arch. Straight above it is the round rear arch. It's probably a Georgian sash window, but that cuts through the jambs of an upper opening. You can see with great big blocks in the jambs, and that in turn is cut across by the vault. So the top opening must be earlier than around 1600. So maybe there's a western tower once. A lot's gone.
You know, you are a very irritated man, Mr. Ryder. You always manage to see stuff that I've completely missed. What a fantastically complicated, very beautiful, but complicated building.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
Absolutely.
So you can see this is called the Lang Pack, the pack which is Lang, and this tells the story of an incident that occurred in the winter of 1723 at Lee Hall, which is 3 or 4 miles down the valley from here. And the owners of Lee Hall went away for some, for a weekend break perhaps in further south, leaving just 2 servants behind, a servant called Alice and an older servant, I believe, called Edward. And when they were on their own in the house, there was a knock on the door and there was a peddler outside, and he had about his person a long pack. And he says, "Look, I've been working all day, do you mind if I just leave this here and come back for it in the morning?" And they said, "No, that's no problem at all." So they took it into the kitchen and laid this pack down, and off went the peddler, and Alice and Edward were left on their own. And then Alice started to get worried. She was convinced she'd seen the pack move. And so she called Edward, and he came along with his blunderbuss, whose name was Copenhagen, I believe. I don't know whether anybody else has a blunderbuss called Copenhagen. And in fear, he shot the blunderbuss into the long pack, and there was a hideous groans and blood spurted out and much writhing. And they'd obviously foiled a plot for the occupant of the long pack to rouse in the middle of the night and open the door and bring in people who were going to rob the place. So they called in all the neighbours, and they waited and hid. And then at midnight, Edward blew a silver whistle, which was inside the Lang pack, and all of these baddies came bursting out of the woods, and to be met with a fusillade. Is that the right sort of word? The fusillade of fire from all of the defenders, and some of them, 4 of them were killed, and others fled, and the house was saved. There you are, 1723. That's a long time after the border wars, but extraordinary story.
Yeah. The real story about this, that story probably happened, but this stone is twice as old as that.
What?
This is a coped grave slab, probably the 1200s. If you look very closely, which you can't see today, there's a pair of shears, a woman's symbol carved on it.
Oh.
And you can see the mouldings on the edge. It's very typical of the 13th century. So it's a medieval grave slab. It does, I'll grant you, look like a long pack.
It does look
And
like
the story has too much detail to be certainly made up, I think.
Sure it hasn't been made up. I think they made a film of it in the 1730s, and it's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Somehow extending this idea of Bellingham being a place with a hint of wildness,
Yes.
far longer than you might expect, really.
Yeah.
What a place. It just goes to show that you look at a thing like this and you can just take it for granted, but it's so
It's a good building.
It's a good building. So much mystery, so much history.
I mean, there's 70 odd medieval churches in the county, but this is a good one.
Really marvellous.
Yeah.
Absolutely marvellous.